In the midst of all the other natural disasters that have descended upon our world and even our nation in 2020, we've had an outbreak of floods and storms. Some of them have caused people's homes to be swept away, and they've discovered that their foundations were not very sound. Which leads us to a very spiritual question. How is your foundation? My own sister-in-law and her husband have a home in Virginia on a very quaint and historic street. And this year, that beautiful historic street turned into a raging river. A flood that had never been experienced in the last 150 years hit in 2020. And their home, which was built on a brick foundation, found that the raging waters rushing down their residential street washed away the bricks of their foundation and caused their home to be in damage of collapsing. This was totally unexpected. Their basement was filled with mud and debris. Thankfully, a group of Amish women, ironically, showed up with buckets and with mops and sponges, and that Bucket Brigade cleaned out their basement. But it made them aware that their home, which seemed so sound, was really built on a foundation that proved otherwise. You know, in our nation, we are seeing cracks in our society that many people never thought possible. Not just due to the COVID shutdown that affected many states, not just due to governors and other elected officials that really overstepped their own limited powers, but the response that we've seen, sometimes even in our own churches, and animosities that were sparked by people who advocated wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. We've seen social and racial tension like we haven't witnessed in 50 years. And some of our cities have fell victim to those kinds of riots and protests and certainly the unrest. Even as I make this recording, there are many cities right now that are either on lockdown or dreading the weekend to come because they know there will be another round of violence. It seems like for so many years, even our politicians have pandered and put off really dealing with problems. They declared a war on poverty back in the 60s, and yet poverty seems rampant still today. There was a war on drugs, and yet drugs are decimating our young people and our society as a whole. There's been a war on crime, and yet crime is rampant and oftentimes not even being prosecuted today. And of course, there were those who advocated for the right of criminals, the right of the mentally unsound, and yet criminals and those who in former years would have been treated now roam our streets and victimize innocent people. What in the world is happening? It's as if the foundations of our society are being demonstrated to be so very weak, and they are crumbling before our very eyes. You know, Jesus Christ addressed this situation in a parable that he shared in Matthew chapter 7. In verse 24, he says this, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them may be compared to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and slammed against the house, and yet it did not fall, for it had been founded on the rock. Everyone who hears the words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house upon the sand. The rains fell and the floods came and the winds blew and slammed against that house, and it fell, and great was its fall." My question for you today is, where have you built your foundation? Is it upon the day-to-day routine that you have established over the years? Is it upon some idealized version of what it means to be an American or to live in this society today? Or have you built the foundation of your life on a rock that does not move? We know that the only sound foundation to build your life upon, to base your eternal expectation upon, is Jesus Christ. Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4, that Jesus is the rock that we must build our lives upon. He's the only sure thing in a world of chaos. Don't wait until the rains fall upon you and your family. Don't wait until the floods come and the storms rage. Build your life upon Jesus Christ. Have the blessed assurance that He will never fail you, and that having built upon Him, your house will stand, not just in this life, but forever. We wish you Godspeed.